I shrank into the corner of the table, the crimson wine in my glass mirroring the reflections of the chandelier hanging above me. Loud laughter buzzed in the air like a swarm of pesky flies, and the clinking of glasses mingled with venomous jokes. "So, another month without a job, huh, dear?" Ethan Thompson sneered, his laughter like a whip cracking across my nerves. "Maybe you should try working at a coffee shop. You might get lucky." His eyes, brazen and smug, watched my reaction with amusement. I lowered my head, feigning embarrassment, and the other three men at the table, picking up on his tone, burst into laughter. They were enjoying the show, oblivious to the fact that before the sun set, their world would crumble to ruins. Ethan Thompson and his cronies, dressed in expensive suits, acted as if they owned the world. They were top managers at Sterling Corporation, a tech giant that they believed they had created, nurtured, and led to the pinnacle of success. They couldn't imagine that the true owner and mastermind behind this empire, a person whose name they didn't even dare utter, was watching them right now. I am that person. Olivia Bennett, CEO and founder of Sterling Corporation, wife of Ethan Thompson, the very woman he had just brazenly mocked in front of his colleagues, turning me into an object of amusement. For 7 long years, I had maintained this carefully constructed illusion. When I first met Ethan Thompson, I decided to conduct a risky experiment. Instead of revealing the truth about my success and influence, I introduced myself as a fledgling freelance financial consultant, tentatively navigating the thorns of the industry. I lived in a modest apartment, drove an unremarkable car, and exuded a showy humility. Initially, Ethan Thompson seemed the epitome of warmth and support, encouraging me in the early years of our marriage. But that support, like a dying fire, gradually faded as soon as he realized that my career didn't meet his ambitious standards, didn't evoke pride in him. In his eyes, I was just a happy wife, blessed by his financial support. It flattered him to play the role of the hero, the sole breadwinner, the man whose will was law in our marriage. With each passing day, his contempt became more apparent. And tonight, like every cursed evening, he used me as the final chord in his symphony of mockery. I inconspicuously raised my glass to my lips, hiding a barely perceptible smirk. They suspected nothing. None of them had any idea that everything they boasted about, their positions, salaries, those exorbitant contracts, was entirely in my power. They couldn't imagine that I was the one signing the papers for their promotions, approving their inflated budgets, and even choosing the recruitment agencies that brought them to the company. And especially not that tomorrow, all of this would come to an end. I had been preparing for this for years. After countless hours of meticulous observation, gathering evidence, after every, even the most insignificant detail, had been perfectly fitted, I was ready to drop the mask. Sterling Corporation is not just a company that I built from scratch. It's the perfect symbol of the revenge I'm about to unleash on their heads. Ethan Thompson raised his glass, clinking it with the other sharks in expensive suits. "To the ladies who don't give up, even when they repeatedly fail," he said, casting a venomous glance in my direction. I slowly lowered my glass to the table, forcing a smile onto my face. "Enjoy the evening, gentlemen," I whispered, "because tomorrow everything will change forever." Almost 2 years ago, when the first signs of rot and abuse of power crept out from under the glossy mask of Sterling Corporation, I started digging. Ethan Thompson and his gang were wallowing in luxury, using the company as a personal wallet, trampling on the rules, and pulling the strings of contracts like puppets. But suspicions are just whispers in the wind. I needed irrefutable proof. I assembled a team of the best private investigators, those who know how to see in the dark. They tracked their every move, every secret meeting in smoky offices, every obscenely expensive dinner paid for with corporate funds, every email saturated with dirty deals with external partners. Everything was recorded with maniacal precision. I even implemented my own system of covert surveillance, a complex web of information gathering artfully woven into the very heart of Sterling Corporation. What I dredged up from this network turned out to be a nightmare that surpassed all my worst fears. Ethan Thompson and his gang weren't just rotten to the core, they were weaving a dirty conspiracy with rival firms, lining their bottomless pockets with betrayal. They unscrupulously leaked confidential Sterling Corporation information and manipulated internal markets like puppets for their own gain. I had it all: emails steeped in lies and conspiracy, text message exchanges where they openly discussed prices with competitors, and even records of dubious transactions flowing into their personal accounts like dirty streams. But perhaps the most disgusting discovery was how these hypocrites treated their subordinates. Harassment, humiliation, cynical exploitation of those who couldn't fight back. That was their true face. I understood that simply gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed a blow, as devastating as a bolt from the blue. I needed to personally delve into this cesspool to see with my own eyes the poisoned atmosphere they had created. And I decided, determined to experience what it was like to be in their shoes, I applied for a job at my own company. Of course, not under the name Olivia Bennett, CEO of Sterling Corporation, but under the fictitious name Emily Stone, an ordinary applicant eager for a chance. I created a new identity, meticulously crafting every detail to appear to the HR department as just one of many desperately seeking employment. And they suspected nothing. A few days later, an email arrived in my inbox with an invitation to an interview. The interview took place in a cramped conference room on the 7th floor of Sterling Corporation headquarters. I wore a modest, unremarkable suit and even deliberately chose slightly worn shoes to match the image of a woman struggling to make ends meet. 3 men awaited me in the room, all trusted confidants of Ethan Thompson. I recognized every face. They had all been present at those very closed-door meetings where they plotted behind my back and made sarcastic comments about me. "So you've been out of work for quite some time, haven't you?" one of them drawled, his lips twisting into an unpleasant smirk as he casually flipped through my resume. "Yes, I've been actively seeking a suitable position," I replied, trying to make my voice sound as meek and humble as possible. Inside, however, everything was boiling. "I'm afraid," the second man drawled, casting a disdainful glance at me from head to toe, "that the job market is extremely competitive right now. We receive hundreds of resumes from candidates far more qualified than you." I realized they had made their verdict before I even crossed the threshold of the office. They had absolutely no interest in my skills or experience. They saw only an unremarkable woman with no connections who could not be exploited for their own purposes. The interview lasted no more than 15 minutes, but they spent the lion's share of that time openly mocking me instead of assessing my professional qualities. One of them even took out his phone and started typing something while I was trying to answer yet another question. I didn't need to look at the screen to guess who the message was addressed to: Ethan Thompson. And as I suspected, a few moments later, all 3 of their phones rang. The phone screens in the interviewer's hands buzzed annoyingly, like a swarm of angry bees. One of them, grinning crookedly, glanced at his gadget. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, raising an eyebrow ironically. I didn't need to look at his phone. I knew perfectly well who had sent that message. Ethan Thompson. He knew I was here and was enjoying my humiliation. I was used to it, but not a muscle twitched on my face. Only slightly lowering my head, I mumbled a quiet thank you, accepting their fake, hypocritical assurances that they would definitely be in touch. Without saying another word, I left the stuffy interview room. I didn't need their calls. I didn't need their approval. I had already gotten what I wanted. I had seen them from the inside, how they ruthlessly reject those they deem unworthy, how they treat people like disposable materials, how they cultivate this rotten, toxic atmosphere in which only the likes of Ethan Thompson can thrive. They thought they were in control. They thought they could continue to manipulate and destroy anyone who displeased them with impunity. But tomorrow, everything will change. Tomorrow, I will no longer be Emily Stone, a pathetic, unemployed woman. Tomorrow, I will enter this hall not as a broken supplicant, but as a triumphant CEO of Sterling Corporation. And I will do what these arrogant types never expected. I will collapse their house of cards. The next morning, I arrived at the company long before dawn. But this time, I didn't sneak in through the back door like a hunted animal, like a humiliated applicant. I triumphantly walked through the main hall of Sterling Corporation. Employees scurried past, politely nodding, not recognizing the threat in me. Not yet. No matter, after today, they will carve my name in granite in their memories. Inside the huge boardroom, everything was ready for the explosion. Shareholders, like vultures, were already circling in anticipation of the prey. The executive team, with faces of stone statues, took their seats, and on the giant screen behind me, a ticking time bomb, evidence meticulously collected over the past 2 years. I wouldn't need to say much. These clues spoke for themselves. The doors swung open with a defiant creak, and Ethan Thompson strode into the room, flanked by his entourage of 4 closest cronies. Smug smiles plastered on their faces. They thought this was just another routine financial report, another meeting where they'd be lauded for their fictitious achievements. Little did they know, today would be the last time they'd enter Sterling Corporation as the arbiters of fate. Calm and composed, I sat at the head of the table, watching Ethan Thompson, ever the self-satisfied man, settle into the vice president's chair, the chair he flaunted so proudly. Then he noticed me. The smile froze on his face, a flicker of confusion in his voice. His eyes darted around the room, seeking answers, trying to comprehend what his unemployed wife was doing at a senior executive meeting. But no one rushed to alleviate his bewilderment. I placed my hand on the thick folder in front of me. My voice was devoid of the submissiveness he'd grown accustomed to over the past 8 years. "Sit down, Ethan Thompson. You and your friends will find what I have to say quite interesting." I detected hesitation in his eyes. He didn't realize he was standing on the precipice, but he still obeyed my command, as did the other 4 men, who felt. An eerie silence descended upon the room, so profound it seemed you could hear nerves fraying. "Before we begin," I said, my gaze laser-focused on Ethan Thompson. Each word carried weight and clarity. "I'd like to formally introduce myself. I am Olivia Bennett, the founder and CEO of Sterling Corporation." The silence thickened, morphing into a palpable pressure. Shock on their faces gave way to outright, unadulterated panic. Ethan Thompson seemed to have forgotten how to breathe, his face paling. A telltale sheen of sweat appeared on his colleagues' foreheads. But I wasn't about to stop. With a subtle snap of my fingers, The giant screen behind me flickered to life. It displayed a panoramic view of their crimes, documents, emails, text messages, video and audio recordings. Every piece of evidence, a meticulously compiled record of their corruption, insider trading, employee harassment, and shady contract manipulations. For the past 2 years, I've been relentlessly gathering evidence of your nefarious activities, I declared, my voice like steel, cold and unyielding. I have records of every illegal transaction, every instance where every penny diverted for your personal indulgences, paid for with company funds, every email sent to our competitors, logged. Even those conversations you thought were strictly private, all exposed. I glanced at Ethan Thompson and saw him gulping, struggling with a suddenly parched throat. And don't think for a moment, Ethan, that I've forgotten a single instance where you tried to humiliate me in front of all these people. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. You all thought you were untouchable, but only because I allowed you to think that. I rose from my seat, my gaze sweeping across the shareholders, feeling my confidence fill the room. I have more than enough evidence to turn this case over to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the legal department, and federal investigators. But before I do, there's one small matter I need to take care of. I grabbed a stack of termination papers, each one signed with cold, unwavering precision, and forcefully slid them across the table toward Ethan Thompson and his cronies. Effective immediately, all of you are terminated from Sterling Corporation. The words landed like a thunderclap, and Ethan Thompson jumped as if he'd been electrocuted. Color flooded his face, a mixture of rage and primal fear. You can't, he roared, turning crimson. I'm the vice president. I built this company. You didn't build anything. I cut him off, my voice a glacial blade slicing through the air. I built this company, Ethan. I hired you. I let you into my life. And now I'm throwing you out of it. The doors swung open and security guards entered the boardroom, ready to escort the newly liberated executives from the building. Ethan staggered, absolute, paralyzing disbelief swirling in his eyes. He turned desperately to his colleagues, seeking some semblance of support, but met only a wall of indifference. Each of them lowered their heads, avoiding his gaze. He was utterly alone. Calmly gathering the papers in front of me, I said, "Your belongings have already been packed. Your access to company systems has been revoked. Leave quietly. Don't make me make this any more painful than it already is." Ethan trembled, staring at me, but there were no more words left. One by one, they were led out of the room, but I couldn't bring myself to watch them go. From the upper floors, I could see a crowd of employees gathered in the lobby, as if mesmerized, pressed against the huge glass panels. The news of what had happened spread instantly. Sterling Corporation had finally gotten rid of the rotten tumor that had been eating it from the inside. Within hours, the story was all over the financial news, splashed with headlines about a large-scale purge at Sterling Corporation. Social media exploded as people dug into the dirty past of Ethan Thompson and his cronies, unearthing countless stories of abuse of power within the company. The phone rang off the hook with calls from competitors, but no one was eager to poach Ethan Thompson and his henchmen. No one wanted to tarnish themselves with people Sterling Corporation had just publicly exposed. Ethan Thompson's circle crumbled before my eyes like a house of cards. And a week later, I learned that 3 of their wives had filed for divorce. Divorce. The collapse of their former luxury became inevitable. Ethan Thompson, once sitting in a posh corner office overlooking the entire city, now languished as a salesman in a seedy electronics store on the outskirts. He could no longer look people in the eye. And me? I didn't have to lift my head to realize my victory. There was no thirst for revenge, no gloating. I simply took back what was rightfully mine. Just 3 months after the removal of Ethan Thompson and his henchmen, Sterling Corporation was no longer the company they once held in their hands. Now I sat in my corner office, admiring the endless expanse of New York, bathed in the morning sun. The company I had created from scratch had finally returned to its roots, to a place where innovation is born, where creativity and progress reign, untainted by selfish interests. The Reformation began that day, immediately after the purge. I called a company-wide meeting for the first time in a long time to address the employees personally, not as Ethan Thompson's unemployed wife, but as Olivia Bennett, CEO and founder of Sterling Corporation. I addressed thousands of employees. We're starting with a clean slate, I told them, and this time, no one will be forgotten. Changes swept through the company like a whirlwind. I didn't hesitate to fire everyone who had helped Ethan Thompson and his cronies, especially those who had turned a blind eye to harassment and discrimination for years, entrenched in the HR department. Top-notch professionals filled the vacancies, many of whom had been unfairly ousted by the previous regime. Within a month, more than 20 former employees received invitations to return, people who had been forced to leave simply because they were unwilling to put up with the rotten system. Among them was Ava Miller, a brilliant software developer whom Ethan Thompson had personally kicked off a major project simply because she refused to attend his idiotic drinking parties. When I called Ava Miller and when I offered Ava Miller to return, there was clear disbelief in her voice. "You really want me back?" she asked over the phone, as if she couldn't believe her ears. "I don't just want you back, Ava," I replied with confidence. "I want you to lead our new AI research team." Within a week, Ava Miller was back at Sterling Corporation. This time, she walked through the front door without a hint of fear in her eyes. Everything had changed. I eradicated the former atmosphere of fear and implemented a policy of absolute transparency. An anonymous reporting system allowed employees to safely report any violations without fear of reprisal. Every senior executive was required to undergo ethics and leadership training. But I didn't stop halfway. We launched a mentoring program where experienced professionals supported and guided newcomers, rather than humiliating them, as Ethan Thompson and his cronies had done. Anyone caught harassing or abusing. The atmosphere at Sterling Corporation transformed instantly, as if the oppressive nightmare had dissipated with the first rays of sun. Smiles, seemingly forgotten forever, bloomed again on the faces of employees. Meetings were no longer steeped in the venom of contempt and passive-aggressive barbs. For the first time in years, I could walk the halls of Sterling Corporation without feeling that oppressive, suffocating weight of a toxic environment. As the internal culture stabilized, the company's financial results shone, reflecting these positive changes. In just 2 months, Sterling Corporation landed 3 major contracts, one of which was with a leading telecommunications giant. They wouldn't even hear of working with us before, partly because of the disgusting reputation the company had earned under Ethan Thompson. But as soon as word of my corporate reorganization spread throughout the business world, they reached out themselves. Stock prices had skyrocketed by an astonishing 35% in just 3 months. Investors, once justifiably skeptical due to Ethan Thompson's reign, now seemed completely confident in my leadership. In their eyes, I saw not just hope, but a genuine belief in the bright future of Sterling Corporation. The press rejoiced, trumpeting the triumphant resurrection of Sterling Corporation. Business Insider even honored me with the title of the woman who brought a tech empire back to life. But the real satisfaction came not from the numbers or the enthusiastic headlines. One day, passing by the break room, I saw Ava Miller and her team with shining eyes, passionately discussing a new project. There was no more fear, no more doubt, only genuine passion for work, something Sterling Corporation had always lacked. It was at that moment that I realized I had done everything right. While Sterling Corporation flourished, becoming stronger than ever, Ethan Thompson and his cronies were sinking like stones. Ethan Thompson's name disappeared from financial reports, ceased to appear in lists of influential executives. He became a shadow of the past, a living warning to those who naively believe that power can be used with impunity for their own selfish purposes. I heard rumors that he was now scraping by with odd jobs in a rundown electronics store, where his opinion wasn't worth a dime. The same man who once managed billions as vice president. The others didn't fare. Much better. The trio from Ethan Thompson's team were barred from the IT sector for 3 years, the consequences of violating the non-compete agreement. One brave soul tried to sue Sterling Corporation, but suffered a crushing defeat, drowning in a sea of evidence against him. I didn't care. They were the past. What mattered now was the future of Sterling Corporation, a company free from the likes of Ethan Thompson and led by people with genuine talent and impeccable integrity. And I felt this was just the beginning. 6 months later, Sterling Corporation was unrecognizable. I stood by the window of my office, admiring the night city. Sterling headquarters shone with lights, its offices buzzing with activity, hundreds of employees, filled with new passion and energy, staying late at their desks. I took a deep breath. Finally, I felt the peace I hadn't known for years. Looking back, the last 6 months had been an exhausting but triumphant journey. Sterling had not only survived the coup, but had become stronger than ever before. Stocks had finally stabilized. Quarterly profits had skyrocketed, breaking all records, but most importantly, the atmosphere in the company itself had transformed. There were no more exhausting meetings, no more paralyzing fear of being betrayed or rejected. Now, our employees could freely create, grow, flourish without groveling before the likes of Ethan Thompson and his gang. I saw it in their eyes. This change was impossible to miss. But the revival of Sterling was not the only thing that brought satisfaction. The downfall of Ethan Thompson was an equally valuable lesson. I didn't even need to keep track of him. The news found me on its own. Thompson had become a forgotten name in financial circles. The largest corporations refused to do business with him. Those who once flattered him, basking in the glow of his influence, now turned away with contempt. No one. He had been seized by a strange desire to become like the man publicly trampled and humiliated by Sterling Corporation. Now he eked out a miserable existence as a salesman in a rundown electronics store on the outskirts of Chicago. The condition of his dismissal was harsh. 3 years of oblivion away from high technology. And there he was, in a shabby uniform, hawking phones and tablets to indifferent customers. One day, an old friend of mine accidentally ran into him in this store. She told me bitterly that Ethan Thompson was a shadow of his former self, a man who had lost absolutely everything. No more sleek suits, no more Rolex watches that he once flaunted with such arrogant pride. He had become emaciated, his face gaunt, and in his eyes, only a burned-out emptiness as he mechanically scanned the goods. He had lost everything: clients, reputation, wealth, the luxurious life he had considered an unshakable given. His wife, like a rat, fled the sinking ship immediately after the scandal. She was not ready to trade the life of a vice president's wife for a miserable existence in a cramped apartment, watching her husband turn into an ordinary salesman. 2 months after his dismissal, she filed for divorce, emptying his bank accounts almost to the bottom. Ethan Thompson, who once mocked me, insisting that I would never succeed, was now floundering in poverty, while I stood at the top. I no longer dwell on the past, although I once thought that seeing Ethan Thompson lying in ruins would bring me unspeakable satisfaction. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. Revenge had ceased to be my driving force. My actions were not simply motivated by a desire to destroy Ethan Thompson, but by a drive to restore justice for those he had wronged and to resurrect the company I built with blood, sweat, and my own intellect. Sometimes, sitting in the quiet of my office, I get lost in memories. I recall our first meeting with Ethan Thompson when I still believed in his integrity. I remember forcing myself to smile in response to his cruel taunts. I remember the moment I walked into the boardroom, stood before him, and laid bare the whole truth. But now, those are just pages from an old book. For too long, I lived in Ethan Thompson's shadow, allowing him to think he controlled my life. But that's in the past. Now, my heart beats only for the future, for Sterling Corp. The company is soaring like a rocket. We've forged a momentous partnership with a cutting-edge software giant, opening doors into the very heart of Europe. Ava Miller's artificial intelligence team has surpassed our wildest dreams, and she is now one of the brightest stars in our corporation. And my mentorship program for young, ambitious women in technology is my particular pride. Too much talent has been wasted simply because they lacked the courage to speak up. I won't allow that anymore. Sterling Corporation will become not just a leading company, but a beacon of fairness, innovation, a place where every voice will be heard, and I will personally see to that. I stepped out of my office and saw the smiling faces of my employees, heard their laughter and casual conversations in the hallway. No more fear, no more oppressive pressure, no more feelings buried under the weight of corruption and abuse of power. In that moment, it dawned on me that true revenge is not the downfall of enemies, but the creation of something beautiful. I strode purposefully into the boardroom, where top executives were eagerly awaiting a discussion of our new ambitious development plan. Pulling out the chair, I sat down, feeling the last vestiges of my former insecurity dissipate. Gone was the Olivia Bennett who had once been gloated over and fired. Now, I am Olivia Bennett, CEO of Sterling Corporation, and this is just the first triumphant chord of my symphony of success. The story of Olivia Bennett is not just a flawlessly executed act of retribution. It's an inspiring lesson in resilience, unwavering justice, and true leadership. It exposes the harsh reality of the corporate world. Power belongs not to those who scheme and manipulate, but to those who possess talent, integrity, and an incorruptible conscience. True success is measured not only by wealth and status, but by the positive impact one has on the world around them. In real life, those like Ethan Thompson may bask in the limelight for a while, but the truth always finds its way through, like a ray of sunlight through dense darkness. And those who are truly deserving ultimately take their rightful place in the sun.